which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay, and that eating shellfish is an abomination? Or we could go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith? Or should we just stick to the Sermon on the Mount?
All right, fine. Okay, this is common. It's so common that I want to apologize to God in your presence, my listener, for not writing a defense of the Bible against these not simple, simplistic and ignorant attacks on the Bible. You have to be ignorant, you have to be leftist, and you have to be simplistic. All three are necessary for you to say what the president just said. Okay, let's begin with slavery. Leviticus does not condone slavery in anything even reminiscent. The Bible does not allow anything that even comes close to the slavery that he is speaking about. The very 10 Commandments, the commandment, do not steal, would have made the slave trade impossible, just living by that. You cannot kidnap people, period, whether it's for ransom. The first definition of do not steal in the ancient mind was do not steal people, and then do not steal property. It was never allowed, never suggested, never condoned biblically. What you had in Leviticus is bonded indemniture, meaning I owe somebody money I cannot pay, I work for the person and work it off, which frankly wouldn't be a bad idea in 2013. You steal all of my savings, you're corrupt, you're my partner in business, you are corrupt, you steal everything from me, you are found guilty, then I pay for you to be in prison. How's that for justice? I'll take that system any day. You steal from me, work it off. As for shellfish, the ignorance is awesome. People should just shut up before they condemn what they do not know and they read on an internet page by some swarmy, anti-biblical, left-wing activist. It doesn't say that shellfish is an abomination. It says it's an abomination to the Jew. Period. It's to you. Sometimes an abomination is universal, and sometimes abomination is only applicable to you. And it says to you, I know biblical Hebrew, that the Hebrew of the 5 books of Moses, like I know English. It's to'eva lachem. It is an abomination to you, plural, that is to you Jews. Now, why are shellfish an abomination? I could spend an hour explaining that, because it's unbelievably profound. They are not my explanations. They are of the late great biblical scholar Jacob Milgram of University of California at Berkeley. And it's and I'll just tell you right now, it has to do with death because of the nature of shellfish. It has to do with the fact that they do not swim, that they walk, and there was a pure idea of life versus death that permeated the entire kosher animals and kosher fish and kosher fowl idea. Birds of prey are not kosher birds. Regular birds are. Carnivorous land animals are not kosher. Vegetarian. All the kosher animals are vegetarian. There's a life-death issue that is somewhat profounder than the president's glib attack at the National Prayer Breakfast tells us what an asinine book the Bible is. This merits attention. What was his third example? Oh, yes, stoning a child. I covered that for an hour on an Ultimate Issues Hour. And I will when we come back, but not for an hour. I'll explain it to you in 1 minute. 1-8-PRAGER-776. You are listening to... All right, I need to make a correction, not on anything I said, but implying, which is what I believe and what I was told, that it was today's speech. Or when was the prayer breakfast? Yesterday or today? All right. Well, anyway, either today or yesterday, and that this was This recording, which we were given, is actually from a 2006 speech. I do not believe it's from the current speech. And the reason I tell you is that everything be as absolutely accurate as possible. I'll find out how this happened, and I apologize. But I only apologized chronologically. The point is still valid. It's just it shouldn't have been made in the context of the present National Prayer Breakfast. But now let me answer in any event, because it is so commonly said, the slavery thing and the shellfish thing and then stoning your child. You can't stone your child. The greatness of the Deuteronomy law, if people would study it, is that it prohibited parents from killing children, which was universally applicable, or universally applied, I should say. People thought they owned children. The Deuteronomy law says if your child is that rebellious, and it was not stray from the faith, it doesn't say stray from the faith, particularly perhaps even violent child, you take him to the court, and then if the court finds him guilty, the court will execute him. It never happened. It never happened. Will you please understand, what was it, the Bronze Age? Do you understand when these things were written? In order to make a civilized world? And to make a civilized world, it was critical to allow for respect for parents and to consolidate the family unit. No kid was killed ever. We don't have a record of it. It took the power of killing away from the parent, but it did it brilliantly. Oh, you think your child is so awful that your child deserves to die? You don't touch him. You bring him to the court. So they bring him to the court, and by that time, no parent wants the kid killed, and in any event, they're not going to do it. It took the power of killing children out of the hands of parents. The doctor who spoke, the neurosurgeon, was Ben Carson. Do we have any clip from him? I'll tell you what, he quoted the same Bible. See, this is what's happened here. Those of us who actually say the Bible guides our lives, I think, have a better value system. Not I think, I am certain. Forget I think. I am certain have a better value system. We don't make up a good and evil as we go along. And he pointed out, in front of the president, I might add, the president sitting 2 chairs from the speaker's podium.
I have the taxing and tithing clip if you want it.
And he was saying these things that were remarkable. Here is his words about the tithing.
What about our taxation system?
With the president
so complex,
5 feet from him.
There is no one who can possibly comply with every jot and tittle of our tax. If I wanted to get you or you, I could get you on a tax issue. That doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is come up with something that's simple. And when I pick up my Bible, you know what I see? I see the fairest individual in the universe, God, and he's given us a system. It's called tithe. Now, we don't necessarily have to do it 10%, but it's principle. He didn't say, if your crops fail, don't give me any tithes. He didn't say, if you have a bumper crop, give me triple tithes. So there must be something inherently fair about proportionality. You make $10 billion, you put in $1 billion. You make $10, you put in 1. Of course, you got to get rid of the loopholes. But
all right, now that was it. I mean, this is said 5 feet from the president. I was listening and I thought, I wonder if the president has ever heard anybody differ with him, let alone a black, differ with him publicly, like he did at the National Prayer Breakfast. I don't think so. This man is a remarkable man. The head of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, one of the foremost hospitals and medical schools. He describes the way he grew up. And he said that the biggest thing my mother taught me was never to think of myself as a victim. My father was a bigamist, he said. He had 2 families. I mean, that's, you know, and didn't pay attention to him. He was raised by a mom who he was very angry at a lot of the time because she made him read. What do parents make their kids do? See, it's such a very difficult fine line. because you can so demand from your child that you end up, sitting and smothering your child, which was a danger in my upbringing. And my parents just decided at the age of 14, no more. I will lead my own life, and I blossomed. And there are kids who need to be ridden like a horse. It's very difficult to be a parent, very difficult, unless your kid is just easy from the get-go, which happens in some cases, as there were kids who were difficult from the get-go, and they're probably an even number of each. I tell you, the way in which the Bible was regarded 2 generations ago throughout America, and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 generations ago, is probably the single most distinguishing feature, because of the ramifications of taking that book seriously and thinking there is a body of wisdom that you need to learn, and that you are not going to reinvent the wheel. See, leftism, the most dynamic religion in the world in the last 100 years, much more than Christianity or Islam, has said, you make up, you personally, you feel it through, because morality is feelings. And so kids are asked, how do you feel about it? Not, let me tell you there's a right and a wrong, and here's the right and here's the wrong. Nope. How do you feel about it? And the chaos that's ensued. He mentioned, the doctor mentioned in his address that he has a book out, which I'm going to get, and I hope to get him on the show. And he mentioned he took from, I believe 100 years ago, a 6th grade exam. 6th grade, because you had to pass 6th grade. You got a 6th grade certificate. He said, I don't think most college seniors could pass this exam that 6th graders had to pass. The dumbing down of our institutions. Do you think that's a function of conservatism or liberalism? Be honest. Be honest. You think the people on the left or the people on the right are mostly responsible for the dumbing down of our educational system? Here is where it comes from. Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Bible, or in the parlance of Jews, the 5th book of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses known as the Torah. Deuteronomy 21:18 to 21. If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gateway of his hometown. They shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. So you shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel will hear of it and fear. All right. Now, it's very, very important to understand all of the issues that are involved in this particular law. First of all, and most important, the parents cannot touch him. This is the key to understanding. Not only is this a morally defensible position for the time in which it was written, certainly, but it was a massive moral elevation of society. Remember, this text is about 3,000 years old. And at that time that this was written, this is key to understanding this. Parents could kill their children. In most societies, you owned your child. Forget fanticide, which was universal, including Rome, including Greece, the elevated societies. Infanticide was a part of life. But that's an infant. That's why you get the word infanticide. But at a later point in life as well, there was just an understanding you owned your child. What we have here is a staggering break with what existed in that world. What is happening is the Bible here is walking a tightrope. It wants to retain parental authority, because without parental authority, you do have a breakdown in society. Remember, and this is a very big part of it too, remember that every totalitarian regime first attacks parenthood. The Nazis and communists took parents away from parenthood. All the parent did was procreate. The state raises the child. I will come back to that. It's really important. The tightrope being walked here is between balancing parental authority and not allowing parents to kill a child. All right? That you must understand that in order to understand what is being done here. You can read this verse in two ways. One, oh, wow, is that primitive? Rebellious, gluttonous, drunken son won't listen to his parents no matter what they do, is out there causing mayhem, and by golly, they can kill him. Or you read it correctly, and no matter how bad your son is, you can't kill him. You can take him to a court. That's what elders of the city means. It's a court. The elders formed, as it were, a primitive form of court where evidence was heard. The most important thing, and there are many important things in understanding these seemingly difficult verses, the most important thing is this. The Bible took the right to kill a child out of parents' hands forever. That's number one. You can't kill your child, no matter how terrible he is. Now, to begin with, remember, the first answer is parents were forbidden to kill their child. This, in other words, this law was a massive, massive step forward for human rights. It said to parents, you can't kill your child. You have to take such a child to the court. Now, let me ask you a question. In real life, how many mothers and fathers, and remember, mother and father is listed here. They both have to take it. So it did another massive thing. It removed the patriarchal prerogative of determining the fate of family members. It was, see, that it's the book of genius. And I'm particularly enamored of the first 5 books, which is the foundation for Judaism and Christianity. The first 5 books, known as the Torah. This was a major knock at father's ability to determine the fate of his family members. The child, and it's not a young child, by the way. It's clearly an adult child, or at least what adult was in those days, in teenager or older. And this child, this son, could not be brought. Not only could the father not kill him, and certainly the mother not, but the father could not even bring this son to the court. The mother and the father had to bring the son to the court. How many mothers are going to bring their son to be executed? Just think about it. Think about the inherent logic of the proposition. By the way, we have no recorded instance in history in Jewish Israelite society of a son being executed. It was on the books, and it was rendered essentially impossible, certainly by later rabbinic law, but even by the law itself, because the court had to execute the child. Parents couldn't, and both parents wanting it, And by the way, the son, is allowed and expected to testify on his behalf. It wasn't like, we think he's bad, shoot him. So that's number 2, and this is the first step forward is parents can't kill a child. The second step forward in this law is that the father doesn't have the say. His father and mother shall seize him, not obey his father or his mother. This they shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours, he will not obey us. Do you see how many times it is the two of them, the father and the mother? Everywhere possible, you have an affirmation of parental equality. Honor your father and your mother, not honor your father. Honor your father and your mother. And in another verse, it says, a man shall fear or hold in awe, depends how you want to translate the Hebrew, his mother and father. There, the mother is put first in the Ten Commandments. When it comes to honoring, the father is put first. Because it's less likely that a child will fear the mother. When it has fear, it puts mother first. And where it's more likely that he'll honor the mother, they put the father first. This stuff is highly, highly thought out. There is no case on record, I repeat, in which a person was put to death under this law. The purpose was, however, to have it on the books. Because, and now I want to deal with this whole issue of how important it is to have a level of parental authority in a society. Not authority to kill you, but authority that a child takes the parent seriously. The first thing that a police state goes after is parental authority. The first thing the Nazis and the communists undermined was parental authority. The hero of the Soviet Union, I have told this story, but not for a long time, Pavlik Morozov was the boy's name. He, according to Stalin and the Communist Party, was a hero. He was on postage stamps of the Soviet Union. Every child in the Soviet Union learned about this child hero. What did he do? He snitched on his father for keeping grain away from the Soviets in Ukraine when the Soviets killed about 5 to 7 million Ukrainians, deliberately starved to death. So the father, actually trying to keep the child and the family alive, was snitched on. The father was executed, and the child is now a hero for having his father executed by the state. The same thing held true with Nazi Germany, where children took oaths of loyalty to Hitler, who was far higher than their parents. Parental authority is a bulwark of a decent society. Let me make a final point here. That aside from taking the ability to kill a child out of parents' hands for the first time in human history, making fathers and mothers equal in the eyes of a child for the first time in history, remember something. When this was formulated, it was a world of absolute, uncircumscribed evil. And it was to develop a good society. You didn't just say, be nice. There had to be a sense of, I am obligated to be a decent person. And this was one of the ways in which this book that shaped the world more positively than any other in history did it. I'm Dennis Prager. Thank you for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. Well, as most of you know, I have been preoccupied to an unprecedented extent with preparing the Rational Bible, my explanation and commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible in the hope that it will make millions of people aware of why it is the greatest book that has ever been written, and even have people flirt with the idea that perhaps even God is behind it, because it is so, it has no parallels in the world in which it came 3,000 years ago. So periodically I have dealt with difficult issues in the Bible that prevent a lot of people from taking it much more seriously. So I'd like to do that today. Slavery. The question is posed all the time, completely understandably. Well, why didn't the Bible ban slavery? Completely understandable question. Well, as slavery is primarily discussed in the book of Exodus, and it is the book of Exodus that is the first of my 5 volumes, I would like to discuss slavery and answer the question, why didn't the Bible ban slavery? I have a lot of answers, all of which, or nearly all of which, will be new to most of you. But it is all there. I'm not making anything up, except, obviously, some theories that I have that I can't quote to you verbatim. I can quote to you the laws about slavery. But first, let me answer the question in the biggest macro way I can. Let us say the Bible, after all, I do believe, certainly with the first 5 books, as ultimately of divine origin. So God can't stand slavery. Let's assume that that's true. It has to be true. God loves his children. We are all his children. So why doesn't God just say, if you don't believe in God, why doesn't the Bible just say, thou shalt have no slaves? All right? So let me begin with the first part of an answer. The Bible is interested in making life better. It is not interested in utopia. And that is my view of life, and I got it from the Bible, especially these first 5 books. That's where I got it from. The best is the enemy of the better might be one way of providing a subtitle for biblical morality. Let us say the Bible had said, remember what we're talking about. We're talking about over 3,000 years ago. Do you understand how long ago that was? That's the late Bronze Age. All over the world, every society, people were sacrificing people to gods. They would be burning people as sacrifices to gods. That is the world into which the Bible entered. Okay? You must understand. Not only that, slavery was universal. By universal, I don't mean nearly universal. I mean universal. Every single society had slavery. It would be like banning travel. So the Bible, specifically the book of Exodus, can't stand slavery. And by the way, I'll come back to that utopian issue in a moment. It is very instructive where the laws of slavery appear. They appear right after the 10 Commandments. You have in Exodus 20, God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. Right after that, in Exodus 21, what you have is God summarizing in greater detail the 10 Commandments, expanding, not summarizing, expanding the 10 Commandments, with one exception. First, before restating the 10 Commandments in Exodus 21, what God does is give laws about slavery. Why would that be? Because the Israelites, the Hebrews, the Jews, had just left Egypt months before. So it is, as it were, the Bible, God wants to make it clear, yes, you can still have what is called slavery, but it will be nothing like what you had in Egypt. It's going to become a humanized institution. Now back to the bigger point. Let us say the Bible said, thou shalt have no slaves. What would have happened? Two things would have happened. Number one, nothing. It simply would have been ignored. Right? It would be as if there would have been a biblical injunction, give away everything you own. How many people, and there are people who believe that there are biblical injunctions about giving away everything you own, especially Christians reading the New Testament. They will point to a verse here and there. How many people give away everything they own? 0.5%? No, not even. What am I talking about? It's negligible. In other words, essentially no one. In other words, you can have a biblical injunction to feel good about yourself, but the question in life is not do you feel good about yourself? The question in life is do you do good? Had there been a biblical injunction 3,000 years ago, thou shalt have no slaves, nobody would have listened to it. It would have been ignored, and real slavery, bad stuff, would have just continued. So, what the Bible did was, okay, since slavery is ubiquitous, what we're going to do is we're going to give you so many laws to make it more humane that it's no longer going to be slavery as anyone understood it. That's the biblical view on slavery. We are going to change this institution so radically in a more humane way that it will be unrecognizable as such. It will be that different. I'll give you an example. For one thing, the Bible, when people ask you why didn't the Bible ban slavery, tell them, number one, that what was done to blacks in Africa in the transatlantic slave trade was banned by the Bible. Twice. Number one, the commandment of the Ten Commandments, do not steal. Do not steal was understood always, always. Number one, you may not steal a human being and sell them into slavery. It is first and foremost a ban on stealing people. There would have been no transatlantic slave trade if people simply obeyed, do not steal people. That is what was done to Africans. They were stolen. They were kidnapped. Number two, in case you didn't understand that that was a violation of do not steal, it states in Exodus, this book that I'm writing this commentary on, this explanation of, there is a specific law that if anyone kidnaps anyone, any race, any religion, anyone, and sells them, they are to be executed. Today, the question is, why didn't the Bible ban slavery? I devote a lot of time to this because the book that is coming out in April, The Rational Bible, my explanation and commentary on the book of Exodus, biggest work of my life, deals a lot with slavery, the book of Exodus, not only in God liberating slaves, but in the laws there. And people dismiss the Bible because it allowed slavery, because they don't know what they're talking about. That's why. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. They don't know what they're talking about, but I'm not saying that as an insult. I didn't know what I was talking about either until many years ago when I started studying this in depth. And you realize the genius of the Bible. As I pointed out, Had it banned it, two things would have occurred. Number one, nothing. It wouldn't have been listened to any more than if there had been a law, give away everything you own. Give it to the poor. Nothing would have happened. Instead, it says give 10%. Well, then something happened. The Bible wants the world to be better. It doesn't want to feel good about itself. People who say, why didn't it ban slavery? That is part of the very common human desire to feel good about yourself. Oh, look, I'm for banning slavery 3,000 years ago. But it wouldn't have worked. Nothing would have happened. And the other is, most of the slavery that is allowed in the Bible, the vast majority, is not slavery as we know it, because the Hebrew word for slave and the Hebrew word for servant is identical. I could prove that to you, because it says that Moses is the servant of God. But it's the same word as slave. Nobody assumes he's the slave of God. The Hebrew word eved is the same for both. Bonded indenture is where you work off a debt by getting room and board, and only room and board, and you work off a debt. You know how many Americans came to the United States of America? Or came to America before there was a United States of America? I'm talking about white Europeans who came to the United States to serve in bonded indenture. That's how they pay off their debts, and then they would establish a life as free people. That's exactly what most of the slavery is. You were not allowed to buy slaves. Kidnap slaves and sell them. That was banned twice in this very book, once in the Ten Commandments and once right after the Ten Commandments. Of any faith, of any religion, even a pagan, you couldn't you couldn't kidnap a pagan and sell him as a slave. So African slavery, the slavery that most Americans are aware of and think about when they say slavery, was completely banned. That there were Christians and Jews who didn't believe that the Bible banned such slavery means nothing. It means nothing. It means that they decided not to listen to their own Bible. That's not uncommon, in case you didn't know. So please understand that if you want to do good, you have to usually gradually improve an institution rather than ban it. I'll give you another example. It was true for the founding of the United States that occurred almost 3,000 years later. There would not have been a United States of America if the founders banned slavery. The South would not have joined the Union. The price of having the South join the Union was to allow slavery to continue there, no matter how much you oppose slavery. And if you believe that the formation of the United States was a moral good, then the compromise was worth making. Anyway, it wouldn't have ended slavery. The South would have continued slavery for as long as it wanted. Why didn't the United States ban slavery? You could ask the exact same question, because the price paid would have been terrible. Not the economic price, the moral price. And it wouldn't have ended slavery. All right? So I can't expect you to remember everything that I'm saying. That's why it's being written. And you can pre-order the Rational Bible at Amazon, and I really ask you to do so. It's a life-changing work. I never said that about any of my other books. And I think the Happiness book has changed lives, but it's not how I've ever promoted it. The Torah did indeed, that is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, did indeed ban the type of slavery that modern people think of when they think about slavery, kidnapping free human beings and selling them for use as slaves. All right? And in Exodus 21:16, the kidnapping of any person, Israelite, non-Israelite, for the purpose of enslavement, is a capital crime. You were put to death. So it didn't ban every form of slavery, but prohibited what became African slavery, just as an example. I'm going to take your calls, 1-8-PRAGER-776. I'll give you another example of an incredible law that you probably don't know of. There's a law in the same book. Well, actually, I think it's in Deuteronomy, actually. The 5th book. You are not allowed to return a slave to its owner. Isn't that unbelievable? If a slave escapes, you can't return the slave. That was a pretty strong incentive to treat slaves decently, wasn't it? If a slave escapes, you are not allowed to return him. If you knock out a slave's tooth, if you hit him that hard that just one tooth falls out, he goes free. You kill your slave, you get killed. These are all biblical laws. Pretty amazing, no? And people don't know about this. They just don't know. The third hour every Tuesday is devoted to some great issue. The great issue today is with regard to the Bible and slavery. The most common question I hear asked is, why didn't the Bible ban slavery? I can't repeat the whole answer, otherwise I'll just be doing exactly what I did the first half hour of this hour. So if you're just tuning in, catch what you can, but it's a good reason to catch as much as you can. This is a very big deal. I have answers to that question, and I have provided some of them now. So let me take your calls. And let's see. Well, anyway, somebody had, I guess he hung up. Somebody had an interesting challenge, because I said nobody would have listened to it. It would have been like a law, give all your money away to the poor. Virtually nobody would have listened to it, and how will the poor be served better? If you say give 10% of your income to the poor, or if you say give all of your money away to the poor? Which would do more for the poor? See? It's like minimum wage. The question is one of the reasons that I have the values I have is that, a big reason is I take it from the Bible. I get my values from the Bible. And I realized very early on that you can do much more good if you ask, does it achieve good, than if you ask, does it sound good? It would have sounded great. No more slaves. Nothing would have happened. And vast numbers of people would never have gotten out of poverty, because vast numbers of people got out of poverty thanks to bonded indenture, working off your debts, being and not paid, just being given room and board, which is what obviously every slave is given. All right, so somebody called in and said, well, so many people violate adultery. Why was there a law against adultery? Well, first of all, a lot of people don't violate the law against adultery. Number two, a lot more than would have not violated the law against slavery. But in addition, you can't humanize adultery. It's either committed or not committed. And the same, whereas slavery is not either or. There is a way of making it more humanitarian. Okay, so let's go to. He is there. Here is here, Oklahoma City. Sorry, Terry.
Hello.
I didn't see. I thought you hung up. Hi.
No, hello. Yes, I was just. My point was that your explanation about slavery and how you need to incrementally get rid of it. My point was that then all cultures commit adultery as well. So, what was the point of a law saying no adultery as opposed to maybe a little bit of adultery or whatever?
Well, you could say that then about any law, because everywhere in the world there's murder. So why have a law against murder? Yes,
but that's still the same thing as what you were saying about you could incrementally soften slavery. So then, how
would you incrementally soften adultery or murder?
Oh, I wouldn't. I think it's bad.
No. I know you do. I want to know, though, since I can tell you how you incrementally soften slavery, I want you to tell me how to incrementally soften adultery. If you can't, then there's no parallel.
Okay. I've like a lot of people have always been very disturbed by this thing. Is why didn't they just make it absolutely no slavery?
I know,
No
so that's what I'm answering. It would not have worked. People would have suffered more had there been such a law.
So everybody would just have ignored it and gone on about their business.
Plus the other point that I made, vast numbers of people got out of poverty thanks to bonded indenture, which is a form of slavery. The way in which vast numbers of poor Europeans came to America. You work for no money, you get room and board, you pay off your debts, then you are a free person, you can work, you can eventually buy property, and that's how America was founded in large measure. Poor people coming here in that capacity. Just been spending years working on this in my commentary and explanation of the second book of the Bible. The first 5 books will be coming out over the course of the next few years, called The Rational Bible. We will not survive as America unless we return to reliance on the Bible for wisdom. It's as simple as that. We always did. I know this is news to those of you who went to college, probably never cracked open a Bible, and may have never even opened one, period. Biblical literacy was part of the American bloodstream. If you read any of the great novelists from the 19th century, Herman Melville, any of them, the constant references, it was assumed everybody knew what you were talking about when you made a reference to a biblical idea. I just saw a study, by the way, that the kids who are taught Bible have a 1-letter grade higher average than kids who, in any subject, than kids who do not study the Bible. I didn't even expect that. I'm just telling you if that's what motivates you. But the onslaught against it has been so great, not least of which has been, well, why didn't the Bible ban slavery? I've been answering that this hour, and it's at much greater length in my book, The Rational Bible, coming out in April. Okay, let's go to Bob in Minnetonka, Minnesota. Hello, Bob.
Hi, Dennis. The Hebrews, they did have slaves after they were freed from Egypt, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't they have learned from that experience?
They did. That's my whole point. Because there was nothing like what they had under Pharaoh. You couldn't even keep a slave more than 6 years. On the 7th year, he was free. There was bonded indenture.
Well, isn't bonded indenture different from slavery as we know it?
Correct, and that's what they had.
Okay, well, I mean, it just seems like like with Spartacus, for instance, it wasn't like the idea wasn't there in our ancient history. I think at all times the idea of slavery had been brought forth and debated here and there, starting probably with
Greece was founded on slavery. It was assumed there was no moral problem with slavery in ancient Greek thought.
Well, I mean, I think that the Bible, it's own, has been mentioned in the Bible before. Anything that man touches, he wrecks, so to speak.
Right. So this is a way of improving it. This was a way. That is the reason that the only civilization on a civilization-wide basis that banned slavery was rooted in the Bible. It's not a coincidence. It didn't happen in the Muslim world. It didn't happen in China. It didn't happen in Japan. It didn't happen in the native populations of the world. It happened in what we call the Judeo-Christian world. And the only reason is this Bible. It made people aware that what was done to Africans was despicable. And, by the way, once again, banned Banned, thoroughly and totally banned. Any Christian or Jew who defended African slavery, the kidnapping of people and shipping them into slavery, who was said that as a Bible believer they could defend it, did a terrible injustice to the Bible. Terrible. There is not a shred of allowance in the Hebrew Bible, which is upon which obviously the New Testament is based as well, for slavery as such, as what we had with regard to Africans. Okay, anyway, Bob, I appreciate it. And let's go to John in Greenwood, South Carolina. Hi.
Hi, Dennis. Did you realize that if it weren't for slavery, probably virtually all black Americans in the United States would not ever have been born? Has that ever dawned on you?
Well, it has dawned on me only in the sense that it doesn't tell me anything, because they would have been born. They would have been different blacks born in Africa.
Right, but there wouldn't be anywhere nearly the quantity, and the individuals that we know here in the United States most likely would not exist. Most likely.
Yeah, I agree. But so what? So they would have existed as different human beings born to different parents in Africa.
Well, they might not have. They might not have ever been born, because the conditions in the United States were much different than those in continental Africa. And Africa would not have supported that level of population.
So okay, I was taking you literally. I understand what you're saying. Okay, so you're saying, well, this is the argument that Keith Richburg, who's a black reporter, journalist for the Washington Post made years ago, Out of America, right? It's Out of America, yeah. It's a very important book. I should have him on again. He made the argument as a black American. He said, look, slavery was vile. It's an obvious truism. However, having been a correspondent for the Washington Post in Africa, all I kept thinking was how fortunate I was to be American. So I was the recipient of good fortune based on terrible fortune of my ancestors. Life is complex, but doesn't justify slavery in any way, obviously. Neither did he. But he was making the point, which I think John in South Carolina was doing. By the way, this is another great time for you to give to the Salvation Army. This is the Christmas season, and I'm a big fan of theirs. There's a banner for them up at DennisPrager.com. My book is The Rational Bible, and it's going to hopefully change a lot of lives, because we need people to take religion seriously again in America. I'm Dennis Prager. We continue on the Ultimate Issues Hour. Hi, everybody. You are listening to the Dennis Prager Show. Final segment of this edition of the Ultimate Issues Hour. This one is, why didn't the Bible ban slavery? And I've explained the larger answers, and I've given you example. I haven't given you even all the examples of how humanized the institution was, because the Bible understood if there was just a blanket law against it, nothing would have happened. But the first two things you need to know is that what was done to Africans was completely banned, completely, totally, to the extent that it was a capital crime in the book of Exodus, the one that I'm coming out with in April. The book of Exodus in chapter 21 bans the selling, the kidnapping and selling of anyone into slavery. Anyone. Israelite, non-Israelite, any color, any creed, even a pagan. It didn't matter. You cannot kidnap people to sell them. So those of you who say, well, why didn't they ban it? They did ban what was in fact done. It did ban it. And even that didn't fully work, obviously. It's very painful to me when I study the Bible and I realize that there were Bible-believing Jews and Christians who used the Bible to defend slavery. It is an astonishing thing. It shows you how hard it is to make people good. It is the most difficult endeavor in human species is to make good people. You would think it wouldn't be that hard. That's why I consider it so stupid to believe that people are basically good, that human nature is basically good. It's so hard to make good people. How did people run a slave ship? The floating torture chamber. What kind of human being? I marvel at the human inhumanity to human beings. So this is one of the many things that I grapple with because I deal with all the tough issues. And hopefully you'll come to love the Bible and even start to think, well, maybe there is a God behind this extraordinary book. So, anyway, it's called The Rational Bible. It's out in April for Easter and Passover. You can pre-order it now. The Rational Bible by Dennis Prager at Amazon. The answers are there. The book is awesome. It is my personal vehicle to God. I find it more powerful than prayer even. Be that as it may, thank you for listening. I'm Dennis Prager.